All right, so today what I'm doing is I'm going to be making another one of these fire and smoke vases. And I'm going to show you the outside and the inside. I think if you take a look at the bottom there, you can see that there is a geometric pattern that's pressed into that, and that's because of the sheet that I'm pouring it on, this right here. This is actually a window film that has that pattern in it. Another reason I want you to see the inside is because I wanted to be able to see the flames from the inside and the outside, and so that's going to become really important here in a few minutes. So I've already mixed up my colors for the most part, with the exception of the orange, because I wanted to show you something. If you're new to mixing epoxy, for this one I've got mica powders in it, and I do use the mostly I use the Rolio brand. This is the Rolio Tiger Orange. But when I am mixing it, I usually start with just a small amount of epoxy in the bottom, and that allows me to make sure that there aren't any clumps of powder that don't get mixed thoroughly. So I'm going to probably spend more time mixing this little tiny bit than I am going to when I add the remaining of the epoxy. For this particular project, I'm actually doing 28 of these fire vases for a client. And so I need them to be not exact, but uniform. And so I've marked on the side of each cup the amount of each color that I need. The other thing that I did too, so we've got the graphite black, which is going to be the smoky outside. We've got the burgundy, which is going to be the center. And then the scarlet red is actually a paste. And then the orange, I already went over the orange, and the yellow is a combination of the, I hope I say this right, aureole yellow, Rolio, plus I've got neon pigments in the yellow and neon pigments in the orange, because I really want that to pop, and it gives a different element as well, where you can get a totally different look with the lights if you use a black light on it. Of course, it's got to be dark, but it really, really looks very cool. So I'm going to finish mixing up that orange. Now that I've crushed all of that powder, I can just work in the neon and then fill that up to the line where I need it. And so then what I'm going to show you is how I pour it. So there is a specific pattern to this so that I can get the flames the way I want them. I've done this design where I have the flames coming out of the bottom as yellow, and I've also done it where they come out as red, and that's what we're going to do today, is the red. And this was a specific requirement for my client for these pieces, so we are going to start with the deep burgundy in the center after I pour the smoky rim. So this is the graphite black, like I said, and so I'm just going to go all the way around the outside. And I want this to be fairly uniform in how much I have. So after I do that first pass, I just kind of take a look at where it might be a little bit narrower on the smoke. And then of course just get the rest of that epoxy out of there. I will normally set aside at least one of my mixing cups so that I can use it to test how my epoxy is curing without touching the actual piece. Okay, the next one that's going to go down is the burgundy, and I'm not pouring all of the burgundy yet. And because this is an oval and not a circle, I'm going to kind of come out just a little bit, and I'm going to leave about 1 ounce in the bottom of that cup. We're going to come back to that. Make sure I get rid of the drips there. Okay. Next thing to go on is I'm going to put down a little bit of clear. Oh, the epoxy's a little bit slow here. Let's speed that up. So I'm going to put the clear just in a small little ribbon all the way around the burgundy. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want to make sure, if I put all the colors down without putting this clear, what happens is they don't want to move very well when I'm shaping the flames. And so then if I were to look at my finished piece without having given it that extra clear epoxy to give it some slip, I'm going to see the inside not as pretty as it could be. Okay, so we've got that. And now I'm just going to spread out that clear layer from the burgundy to the smoke and just give that a little bit of space for the other colors, the orange, the yellow, and the scarlet red to really have a chance to move around. Okay, so we've got that. Next color is going to be the red, scarlet, and that's going to go just right around the outside of the red. And again, because this is an oval instead of a circle, I'm going to give it a little bit more of the epoxy on those ends, closer on the longer part of the oval. And I have measured this precisely. Every one of these pieces is 22 ounces, total 22 ounces of epoxy to achieve this. And the width of this piece is 18 inches wide, and the length is 21 inches wide. Okay, so now that I've got the red, I'm going to do the orange with the neon pigments. Also, what I want to make sure that I'm doing is I don't want to see any negative spaces where the clear shows through. Again, the clear is just from movement. So once I've gone around, now I'm going to just kind of wave it back and forth. This pattern does not matter because we're going to be manipulating this with spatulas and also, well, first of all, with a hairdryer. And you'll see the technique that comes up with that. And it's really pretty just by itself, but again, I want this, it has to have flames, and I want this to have the same pattern for all the pieces that this lady has ordered. Okay, the last one, actually not the last one, second to last one is the yellow. And again, this has got the neon in it. Okay, then I'm going to just kind of go back and forth, just randomly, making sure I scrape out the rest of that epoxy so that I'm not wasting anything. Okay, and then the very last bit of epoxy to go on is putting the rest of the burgundy on. My client really wants to see a lot more of the red, so I'm adding this at the last portion here so that that red really is on the bottom and in the center. Okay, so next stop is going to be the hair dryer. Let me grab that real quick. Okay, and this is really pretty with what happens to it. All right, so I definitely need the smoky rim on this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the hair dryer and I'm going to start pushing the rest of the colors back toward the center. Okay, now that I've pushed it toward the center, now I'm going to take the center and push it out toward the edges. And I don't know if you noticed, but I have these weights that I put on the corners of the plastic. So the last thing I need to have happen is using the hairdryer and having the plastic flap over onto the epoxy. It's a complete mess if you do it that way. So let's do from the inside to the outside. Okay, and then one more time from the outside to the inside. All right, now the next step is to create the flame. So I'm using a silicone spatula, and what I'm going to do is when I'm manipulating this, I want to make sure that I'm touching the plastic underneath. Again, so that I can have the epoxy to be manipulated not only for the surface look, but also for the interior look. So basically, I'm just going to do some figure eights. I do turn the spatula from side to side, depending on how much of the color I want to draw to the outside or to the inside. For this particular purpose, I don't want too much yellow in the inside, so I'm going to go like this. As I get around to the yellow, I'm going to pivot that so that it's a very thin back this way, and then do the same thing here, do the same thing here, just going around like that, one after the other. All right, so that's how we begin. Now we're going to start with the flames. So it's basically from the center out, and then slowly drag it into the smoke. Next one. I'll take turns pivoting the spatula so that I can either go narrow like this, or I can go thick like this, and I can give it a little bit of a wave, making sure that those flames don't all flow in the same direction. And I always do just a outside, I shouldn't say that. The first time I pass around, I'm going to go around this circle again. I'm going to do fairly wide spaced flames just to kind of get it working here. And you can see how rapidly this takes shape for the different colors and the flames. This is the same technique that I used for the fire pit, which I will show at another time. It is a several day process because I actually make the flames separately. Make a separate little fire bowl, and then I make all the flames, and once the flames are done, then I fill them into the pot so that it looks like a standing fire. And then I fill that with a charcoal looking rocks so that it again mimics the fire, and it's really stunning, but it's a completely different piece. Okay, so now that I've gone from the inside to the outside, now I'm going to draw thin lines to the center, just going around. But always a little curve to give it the illusion of what flames would do as they dance as they're burning. And I will come back over this one final third time just to make sure that I don't have any gaps that haven't been addressed, because if I miss them, what's going to happen is you're going to see color lines from pouring the epoxy initially, and I don't want to see that, and I don't think anybody else does either. Okay, so almost to the starting point. All right, now taking a look at this, I'm going to just kind of manipulate a little bit more, pull some red up that way, pour a little bit more red up this way, over here. And less is more. I always say know when to stop. If you start getting yourself frustrated, sometimes you just need to leave it alone. Otherwise, you can ruin what you've accomplished here. Okay, in some cases I want to pull a little bit of yellow, so I'm going to just lightly drag through the red and then twist on the yellow and pull through. You see there's a lot more orange and yellow in that one. Do the same thing right here. A little bit right there. Again, twisting that spatula so that I've got a flat edge going through it instead of the thin edge. And it's okay to go over the edge. I always do a little trim and usually a light sanding on the edge when I'm done, just to make sure that everything's nice and smooth. Let's see, a couple more spots right there, a little bit more yellow right there, and one more right here. Okay, one thing I didn't show you is that I did talk about the plastic that I put down. I also use a cord. This particular cord is a draper weight, so it's filled up with lead. Just stays in place so that I can lift that plastic just enough to give myself an outer edge. Okay, final touch is going to be the getting rid of the bubbles with the torch. So just lightly on the torch, back and forth. I will have to do this probably 3 times in the next 45 minutes. I'm always careful not to get too close to the edge of my plastic because I do reuse these. You can reuse them probably about 10 or 15 times before you find that the plastic just doesn't want to release from the epoxy when the piece is finished. But there you have it. That is the first step for the fire and smoke.